Good evening, and welcome to this special financial news report covering the most significant economic stories. Expected to dominate headlines in the United States and around the world over the next 7 days, from April 7th through April 13th, I'm David, your host. And today, we're diving into a week that promises to be pivotal for global markets, trade policies, and economic stability. Buckle up, because the financial world is bracing for turbulence. Let's start with the biggest story gripping markets. The fallout from President Donald Trump's sweeping new tariffs, announced just days ago on April 2nd, 2025. In a Rose Garden event dubbed Make America Wealthy Again, these Liberation Day tariffs, ranging from 10% to 50% on imports, have already triggered a seismic reaction. Over the past 2 days, the S&P 500 shed $5 trillion in value. The Dow plummeted over 2,200 points, and the Nasdaq officially entered bear market territory with a 22.7% drop from its December peak. This is one of the worst weeks for Wall Street since the 2020 pandemic crash, and the next 7 days will determine whether this is a temporary stumble or the start of a global economic unraveling. Asterisk, the tariff tempest intensifies. Tomorrow, April 7, markets reopen after a bruising week, and all eyes will be on Wall Street's reaction. Investors are still reeling from the tariff shock, with major firms like Apple, Nvidia, and Tesla seeing double-digit losses last week. Analysts predict a volatile opening, with some expecting a further sell-off, as hedge funds and ETFs continue unloading over $40 billion in stocks, a trend that began April 4th. Safe havens like Walmart and Costco might see gains as investors seek stability, but the broader mood is one of fear. JP Morgan has upped its recession odds to 60%. And UBS forecasts Federal Reserve rate cuts of 75 to 100 basis points by year-end. Will the Fed signal action this week? That's the trillion-dollar question. Tuesday, April 8th. China's countermeasures kick in April 8th. China's promised retaliatory tariffs, set to begin April 10th, will loom large. Beijing announced a 34% duty on U.S. goods last week, and tomorrow, we expect details on the final list of targeted products likely hitting American agriculture. Tech and energy exports, hard oil prices, already at a 3-year low after a 7% plunge on April 5th, could slide further as China, the world's top oil importer, flexes its muscle. U.S. exporters like Caterpillar, down nearly 6% on Friday, are bracing for a rough ride. Meanwhile, in Washington, Trump administration officials are scheduled to speak, likely doubling down on the tariff strategy despite the market chaos. Yahoo Finance reports EU countermeasures are also in the works. With a 20% tariff on U.S. goods set to start April 9, trade war fears are no longer hypothetical, they're here. Wednesday, April 9th, EU tariffs take effect. Corporate earnings begin April 9 marks the official start of the EU's 20% tariff on U.S. imports, a move that could ripple through luxury goods, giants, and American manufacturers alike. Companies like Boeing, already down 19.5% over 2 days last week, might face more pain. As global supply chains buckle, concurrently, the U.S. earnings season kicks off, with early reports expected from financial heavyweights like JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs. These banks, each down over 7% on Friday, will offer the first glimpse into how tariff turmoil is hitting corporate profits. Analysts predict a grim outlook, with recession fears mounting and consumer spending potentially crimped by what the Tax Foundation calls a $1.80 trillion tax hike on U.S. consumers from Trump's policies. Thursday, April 10th, China's tariffs hit global markets react April 10, is when China's 34% tariffs officially take effect, and the global reaction will be immediate. Asian markets like Japan's Nikkei, down 2.8% last week, and South Korea's Kospi, down 1.7%, could see deeper losses as trade flows falter. In Europe, the Stoxx 600, already in correction territory, might test new lows. Stateside, the focus will be on tech giants Apple, with its China-heavy supply chain. Could see its stock slide further after a 16% drop last week. Reuters reports suggest a $2,300 iPhone isn't out of the question if tariffs drive up costs. Meanwhile, the 10-year Treasury yield, down to 4% on Friday, might dip below 3.86%, its lowest since October, as investors flock to bonds. The flight to safety is in full swing. Friday, April 11th, economic data B. April 11th, attention shifts to the Federal Reserve. The release of the latest FOMC minutes will be scrutinized for any hint of emergency rate cuts to counter the tariff-driven slowdown. Fed Chair Jerome Powell's wait-and-see stance last week frustrated markets, and pressure is building for action as recession odds climb. That same day, we expect U.S. economic data, including the Consumer Price Index CPI for March, which could show inflation ticking up due to tariff-related price hikes. Posts on X suggest traders are also watching Japanese cash earnings and UK GDP data, both due this week, for signs of global resilience or weakness. The stakes couldn't be higher. Weekend, April 12 to 13, protests, policy, and prognosis over the weekend. Financial news won't slow down. Anti-Trump protests already underway in cities like Washington and Los Angeles as of April 5th are expected to grow, with economic fallout fueling public anger. The hands-off movement could pressure policymakers, but Trump shows no sign of backing down. Administration officials might use weekend airwaves to push their narrative, while economists at Oxford Economics warn of global growth hitting its lowest rate since 2008. Outside the COVID era, investors will spend Sunday recalibrating, betting on a rebound, others preparing for worse. Global spotlight. Beyond the use internationally, the tariff war is reshaping the landscape. Canada's new duties on U.S. vehicles, announced last week, will start impacting trade flows. In Europe, ECB official Isabel Schnabel warned of a dramatic surge in uncertainty on April 5th. A sentiment likely to dominate headlines. Emerging markets, meanwhile, face a double whack: falling commodity prices. Oil's plunge is a prime example, and a stronger U.S. dollar as investors seek safety. Elon Musk's call for free trade between the U.S. and Europe, made yesterday, April 5th, feels like a distant dream as protectionism reigns, enclosing a week of reckoning as we wrap up. The next 7 days promise to be a reckoning for the global economy, from Wall Street's opening bell tomorrow to China's tariff hammer on Thursday, and the Fed's critical signals by Friday. Every move will count. The risk of a U.S. and global recession is real, with analysts like those at CNN Business warning America might be hurting itself as much as its rivals. Yet amidst the chaos, opportunities may emerge, whether in safe haven stocks or a potential policy pivot. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. I'm David, signing off. See you next time for the latest on this financial roller coaster.